What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? I always ask about training and learning curves. Every job I've had that went wrong, I noticed that when that question came up, they stumbled. The current job I have, when I asked the question, they had sparks in their eyes as they explained the whole process from day one of shadowing to the transition to working solo. And even when COVID hit, they managed to continue without skipping a beat. Edit, oh gosh, thank you. My first ever award. Made my week. They told me all about their generous severance packages. In the initial interview. Turnover City. Well, the overtime isn't mandatory, but most folks stick around after hours most days. Spoilers, the overtime is mandatory. Fantastic. You should know that if you choose me for this position, I will be declining the optional overtime. I mean, if you're going to walk anyway, it might be funny to call their bluff. My wife actually did this on her interview about working on some Saturdays. She politely refused on grounds of traveling time but obliged to chip in from home if a client needed something urgently. She got the job. Was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken. Hope he's somewhere else now. On a second interview, the general manager brought me into the conference room with his 8 managers present. At first I thought it was a meet and greet, but no, they grilled me for an hour and a half. Didn't appreciate that, along with a couple other things, and politely withdrew from being considered. Couple months later, I'm playing in a ball tournament and come across one of the managers. I mentioned how weird that interview was. He says, "Weird for you?" Ha! I found out then and there you were being interviewed for my job. Yep, dodged a bullet there. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen, because they didn't even try to hide it. Since when is it legal to have employees working and not paying them? What a psycho. I was once part of a group onboarding for an IT job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract and everyone except me signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included "I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy" attached. Without other pages, there was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the HR drone said, "Okay, I guess, me, is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much." After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that HR reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. I was asked to sign a contract that gave the employer full access to my medical records. It was supposedly for drug testing, but worded badly. I signed every other page and got the job. Would have been very interesting if they felt like drug testing me, and they weren't able to. Software developer here. I had a job contract that included a workshop clause. The usual code you write as part of this position is the property of the company. Except in this case, the way it was worded would let the company lay claim to anything I worked on, whether or not it was done on company time or with company resources. There was no way I was going to let them lay claim to my personal GitHub repository, especially when their answer to my question about benefits was, "We'll see what we can do." Last job I worked. Yeah, everyone here is new, but it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back, so being your own lunch. You'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. Ada also was told by my trainer, "You want to know the best advice I can give you? Find another job." This was like my second week in. "They're afraid you'll never come back" is so funny to me. My favorite is there's a lot of people waiting in line to work here, count yourself lucky. Huge red flag. After my last job, I have learned to take the attitude that in interviewing the job, too. I used to think, well, I need a job and let myself think it was sweet that I was being given the chance, but I have a great work ethic, so I always become the man. Supervisors seem to love that term. Well, I've learned that when they say that, they mean they are going to heap a lot more work and responsibility on you than your coworkers. So, now I go into interviews with the attitude that I can always find another job, so I judge the company now. When they ask out of nowhere, what clients can you bring with you? I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. Noped out of that quickly. Sure, it wasn't an interview with an MLM? This actually happened to me. Interviewer: do you have any questions for us? Me: what is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer: job security. LMAO, gotta give them props for honesty at that point. He should have just gotten up and opened the door and gestured out. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that, just sign here and so on. I was working with an indie game studio as a modeler, texture artist. It was just for fun and making contacts. The game we were working on started picking up traction and had studios looking to pick us up. The lead on the project immediately got together with an attorney and drafted up contracts. Not a problem. I got mine, but there wasn't a rush, and since I had to do regular work for bills, I kind of ignored it for a couple days. The lead and his attorney started bombarding me with emails, telling me to sign it. I replied with, after I read it, I'll let you know. I immediately got a phone call from the attorney, assuring me it was all just standard stuff, and if I wanted to secure my position in the studio, I should just sign it. Red flags everywhere. So when I had time, I read it, and I'm glad I did. It stated that anything I worked on in my personal time, which I did a lot of as an artist, was their property, and I had no rights to even show it. If I left the studio for any reason, I couldn't work in the video games industry for a minimum of 12 months. Even though I was working for free, I was not allowed to take a paid position at any other game studio while working with them. The list went on. I told them I wasn't gonna sign that, and if they pressed, I was leaving. They pressed, I left. Find later that the lead started the studio, hired people, then drained the accounts, sold the hardware, locked the doors, and never returned. I didn't know it at the time, but "you'll be wearing many hats" was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto if I ever heard one. It's also a tech startup motto. And a hat modeling agency motto. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said, ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut my pay offer, I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. I feel like that would put a lot of pressure on the employee to not say anything to dissuade an applicant and upset management. You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself. From the company. This is illegal in most US states, unknown about outside the US. Wait, really? This happened to me in Ohio. They also said I had to give it back. I didn't, lol. Edit: guys, stop making Ohio look so bad. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, "Oh, she's not here today," in a tone that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable MW but could come in any time THF. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay, and went on to my other interviews and ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello? I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was cancelled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow? Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities or day-to-day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what, that lead to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position looks like, you won't be able to either. When you ask, "What do you like about working here?" and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. I asked this at one of my first interviews right out of school. My interviewer went, "That's a good question," and was ruminating for a good 2 minutes. She went with, "We get pretty good parking spots." And quickly followed with, "And the people are nice."